it's my pleasure to introduce our lunch speaker today, Bea Wray. Bea has a very impressive background, both, again, like many people in this audience, a somewhat eclectic background, both academic and operationally, as an executive, as a coach, as a speaker, as a writer. She graduated from Emory, went on to Harvard, where she graduated with an MBA with distinction. And after that, had a great career and raised a family, and has some really interesting writings in which she talks about merging the two. She's also a Liberty Fellow from the Aspen Global Leadership Network, like some of you in the audience, and was recently at Forbes Books, where she ran the entrepreneurship practice group at Forbes Books, and now has, as of how many months ago, a couple months ago, left on her own, is doing some writing, some speaking, is founder of the Millennial Women's Network, and is here today to talk about innovation and impact, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So we're looking forward to that. Bea, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Ooh, that's too loud. I am just blown away by everything I've learned in the last couple days by all of you. It feels like an incredible sort of brain banquet. The next 25 minutes or so, I think, will feed our hearts, I hope, as well. Some sort of full of laughter and some fun, and tug on your heart a little bit. I think where Hildy was just taking us, so I appreciate that. As we get started, I think I'm going to introduce you to myself hanging out with some of my friends, and I'm hoping this is the thing that I do. I can hide back up there, but I left on. So, there are three things that we're going to go over that I hope we walk away with. And one is that innovation's impact is often unintended. Another is that human compassion must be the driver. And lastly, that free enterprise indeed does matter. I can hang out here. Let me introduce you to some of my friends.
What it is. Well, luckily I saw this commercial last night that explains what Bitcoin is and how it works. Take a look.
Shit. Oh. I love our little get-togethers.
Well, you know what I don't love?
What?
Not knowing where to put my money for retirement.
There are just too many options. 401ks, IRAs, savings. It's so confusing.
We know where I put my money.
Where?
Bitcoin.
What's Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is the first decentralized digital cryptocurrency that works without a central bank.
Well, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, and it's so simple to use. Transactions take place through the use of cryptography and are verified by network nodes and recorded in an immutable public blockchain. What could be simpler?
Nothing. It sounds great.
Right. So is it like investing in stocks?
Kind of, but not at all.
Really? Because I have so many more questions.
Not me.
Where can I get one of these Bitcoins? Can I buy one at my local bank?
Of course not. What a dumb question.
No, wait a second.
Bitcoins aren't like regular currency. They're mined.
In a physical mine, like gold?
That's ridiculous. Bitcoins are mined on computers using the FHA 256 hashing algorithm, creating 12.5 Bitcoins per block. That is until Bitcoin 20. And then afterwards, 6.25 Bitcoins per block for 4 years until the next halving.
Wait, are we still talking about money?
Cryptocurrency.
It sounds so simple.
Shut up, Margaret. There's no way you understood up. So how much do one of these Bitcoins cost?
$17,000.
17.
Sounds like a bargain.
How do you keep track of these things' value?
Just check the internet. So far today, its value has gone up $1,000, and now it's down $800.
Bea Wray. Many of you probably use Siri. I assume Siri knows your name as well. It's a great example of machine learning. But what I think is interesting is when Siri decided to machine learn my name, she decided to up her game. And she didn't just want to know my name, she decided to become a motivational speaker. And when she says my name, she says Bea Wray. And I take it as instruction on a daily basis that my job is to be a little bit of a ray of sunshine for you. And yes, I do love my children, so I had to put a picture of my daughter up there. She's good. So, there's a lot of technology people in the room. Does anybody here have a connection to Georgia Tech by chance? All right, it was great to get kicked out of the place for saying something from the wrong state. But these are my parents, crazy Georgia Tech fans. There's a couple of us that went to the sort of fluffy school down the street, Emory, that are here. But I show the picture because it gives you an insight to how excited my family was to be a part of Georgia Tech, and that my actual name is Bea because my parents decided that Yellow Jacket was not as appropriate. So I'm talking about my parents. I'll tell you a little bit more about my personal background. And this is a picture of the Ford Torino. When my dad got his newly minted engineering degree at Georgia Tech, he immediately went to work in the Ford Motor Company plant, which is now in Atlanta, where the Porsche place is. And I'll tell you more about Ford as we go on, but I grew up in 13 different homes, and one of the things that sort of speaks to innovation or change is that for a decade, if someone said, well, where were you from in Ohio or Los Angeles or whatever, I said, near the Ford plant, and everyone in the world knew what I was talking about. Then there was another decade where people said, where were you from in New Jersey or Virginia? And I said, well, near where the Ford plant used to be. And then unfortunately there was a third decade and people said, I don't know what you're talking about. So but this is a picture I want to give you, just a personal insight, is when my mom was pregnant with Minnie, we moved to this town outside of Atlanta, and she was desperate to meet friends. My father worked nights. The only perk at the job was to drive home one of these fancy cars every night. And she was trying to meet some friends. So she went out and snatched her beans on the front porch and waved at the neighbors and hoped that someone came over and talked to her, and they didn't. And the next day, my brother and sister are playing out in the front, and she's saying, go play out farther, maybe the other kids will come in. You know, and then she went down to the walkway or the driveway, and she'd snap her beads or bring her knitting and wave to the neighbors, and no one would come over and say hello to her. And I kid you not, she finally put her chair in the cul-de-sac, trying to meet the neighbors, and no one would talk to her. Well, it's now many, many months later, and she's still dear friends with these people. But what happened in those early weeks was no one wanted to associate with the woman, 2 children, 1 young one on the way, and entertaining a different man every night. Because she drove the white car, then she drove the black car, and so I thought you might appreciate that. I tell you that story because, I'm going to move on just so it won't go back. Things aren't always as they seem, right? And I think that that's something for us to really think about as we're innovating new products and we're changing things and we're growing up as entrepreneurs is, what's the other story here? And remembering to build our listening skills. Things are not always as they're seen. I tell it for a second reason, which is to highlight that story because I'm going to refer back to that and the role that story plays in free enterprise and how close that is to my family. And then the last thing is, why not tell a dirty joke after lunch or during lunch to keep you guys awake? So anyway, so I'm an entrepreneur. I love entrepreneurship. I'm hoping to contribute to the conversation today about what it's really like in the trenches and what some of those challenges are. And what I've tried, I wonder if there's one that's not.
I got lots of mics.
What I've tried to do is refer back to some of the conversation we've had over the last couple of days. But as I share with you myself as an entrepreneur, I will say to you the 2 degrees that Dirk didn't mention in my bio are the 2 that every single entrepreneur in this room has. And that's 1 degree in failure and 1 degree in success. And there were a couple comments that brought this illustration to me. And yesterday, I think it was yesterday, Scott Key said, not everything that can be recorded should be recorded. And it triggered first a rash and then an idea. But I have the great distinction of having $4,000 worth of revenue. Probably some of you have that in your pocket or something, but I had $4,000 worth of revenue when a $1.8 billion company spent $500,000 suing us because we were putting them out of business. So that's what you call a bad day when you're an entrepreneur. And what ended up happening after my $384,000 legal bill, which largely was because of this comment, is when you're paying a lawyer $400 an hour to pay attention to too many emails that should have never been happened. Really, there was no case, and it got thrown out, and away we won. But I did have an employee at my company who had a dear friend who worked at another company, and so we were paying over $400 an hour for lawyers to read stories about one of their bachelor parties because they had shared that in email, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is very expensive. But I share it with you because all entrepreneurs have had big hits, big challenges, and the trick is, how do you get back up? Who's there beside you? What I found was my handful of investors, they provided some money along the way and some guidance, but it was that chance to give the hug and the coffee and actually they all said, just give up, let's start over. And it didn't, and it ended up going really well, but the willingness for them to have said, you know what, sometimes we don't get the return we want, that really meant a lot to me. So the degree in success is something also was triggered by something that Scott said, and he was just talking about the potential LIBOR scandal. I didn't have anything to do with the scandal, but I did have a real-life experience that talks to the value of money. And that was another conversation we had. I think it was actually at dinner last night, is the value of Bitcoin and changing and who can play on that trade and what have you. But I just wanted to share with you, this time, I was the pregnant one, 3rd baby, not my mom. I had 2 kids. Something you probably already know, but when you have toddlers and it's November, they're expecting Christmas. So you gotta be prepared for that. But I got a phone call on November, 5th or so, and they said, there's a competitor, it's out in California, they have a 90% profit. We were in the business of software escrow. We held onto the source code in case the software developer defaulted on support or went out of business. So it was largely a legal transaction where we had certain things that we followed and what have you, but I also got a great chance to see marketing technology companies. And another thing we talked about here is someone can build it, but unless you can bring it to market, guess what? You can't just cut a hole in the window and hope they drive up like Burger King, right? So anyway, we were in this business, we had reinvested everything back in the business, and we had the highest growth curve and the greatest name, but almost no profit. So I got a phone call, hey, do you want to buy this company? And as I said, I'm 8+ months pregnant, I have 2 little kids, things like Christmas are coming. The deal has to close by December 31st, by the way. And I hear, yes. It's my voice, but I'm saying, who is answering that question? And it was me, and I proceeded for a couple weeks to get a bid together. I got some investors. We put a bid in, and I had 2 competitors, and it was a few $1 million, and 2, not a penny, but within $10,000 of each other. All 3 of us did the exact same thing, because we know the business, we knew how many agreements they had, and we knew what it was worth. So what's interesting interesting is none of us got the deal. There was a British company that came in, and this was in 2005, and that's why I have a chart here of the British pound sterling, and he was virtually playing with monopoly money, and came in with almost double the bid, so bought it. What was interesting is when I was competing against these three, or thought, it was mostly cash we were offered, but there was a little bit of a buyout. So I had to spend some time on the story of how our big name, our fast growth curve with this other company that had turned all their marketing off that had a profit was the perfect match. And I had laid that out in a plan. Well, what do you think the British company did when they bought that company? They turned around and bought me. So that's a really good thing to have happen when you have three babies. That's funny. So my degree in success is also called luck, but I'm going to take it, and it might be a little bit of being prepared, but there are my two degrees, one in success and one in failure. So innovation's impact is often unintended, sometimes negative, sometimes positive, often leading to the need of another innovation. But I really ask you to kind of think through that, embrace as we go, because the hype of what's new and what's next, sometimes we forget the surroundings and where is this going. And so this was highlighted to me recently when I read this article. It's really only about a week or two old. Eve Blossom is someone from Charleston you may know. She's a dear friend, and she's one of the founders, co-founders of Future Family. And Forbes published this article called "Can Future Family Fix the Infertility Experience?" And it so struck me that we had to fix a problem. Now, it shouldn't strike me. I have many, many friends who struggle with infertility. I have a niece that it took us, and I'll say us, because we were all in the, hoping prairie process of probably 8 years, not 9 months, but we were like, I understand the pain. But it also dawned on me that this problem, to a large degree, is the result of a different innovation to some degree. Not exclusively, but the first birth control pill was approved in 1960. And that's what led to a huge change where children or women were giving birth, not in their 20s, but 30s and 40s, and that results in something else. Now, I say this not because I have a lot of opinions about which way that goes, of course, but my thought is just to say, when we're creating an innovation here, it's often creating a whole other industry there. And I just encourage you to be thinking of that long-term view, which is especially hard to do in that rat race environment of getting to the next thing and being first in the next place. Human compassion must be the driver in everything we do. And my heart is warmed by so much of the conversation we've even had in the last couple of days here. And I'm really grateful for that. So I just wanted to sort of bring that out a little bit farther. Now, Christar and Sergey had mentioned that humans and machines are becoming sort of indistinguishable. And of course, we mean that in certain ways, but let's make sure we're always injecting that heart and our compassion and what are we doing to impact the world in a positive way. Because sometimes if we're not, it might be a negative way. And I loved how Rachel said this morning, we always start with empathy. That is really one of my favorite lines of the last 2 days. So I'm going to tell you a story that is way too heavy on my heart in the last couple of weeks because I have, luckily, I'm fine in my household, but I'll get into it in a minute. But my daughter recently said to me, she didn't go on a trip to Nantahala with her junior class because she was really lucky and was getting invited out to California with my dearest friend. But anyway, while these juniors in high school were on a trip to this rafting experience, 6 parents had to drive 6 hours to go pick up their kids and bring them back because they found jewels there, or in their bag or something. So Juul's is e-cigarette. And I'm going to tell you that for two reasons. One is terribly sad and one is hilarious. So the sad part is I asked my daughter, how do you think they got there? Like, they must have, we knew that the adults had searched the bags because when they went into school that day, they dropped their bags off at 8 a.m., the bus left at noon, and one of my daughter's friends had like some sort of stomach medicine, and it was found in the bag, and they called the parents, and they had to get a note for it. So I said, what did they do? How could they find the jewels? And she said, oh, Mom, my friends can't last 4 hours without them. They carry them with them wherever they go. They tuck them in their bras, and they're, in class. Their guys are in the bathroom. And so that was really like, oh my gosh, can't last 4 hours. To give you insight into me and how brilliant my kids are, or how maybe smart I'm not, a couple days later, my daughter was saying, gosh, Mom, I really feel sorry for these friends. It's Easter weekend, and their parents are going to be in a terrible mood. They just drove 6 hours, and they're on their way back, and they're going to have this terrible weekend, and then it's spring break. They're going to have these terrible spring breaks. Well, I am Pollyanna to the millionth degree, and I said, no, honey, everyone's going to be happy. It's a time of renewal, and they're going to have greater family relationships, and life will be great. And she turned to me, and this is because she actually believed that or thought at the time. She said, Mom, you should just try being a parent. Honest to God. And at the moment, she'd forgotten that I was one 3 times, but in my house, she's sort of the parent in the crowd. Served me right when she was 3. She was sort of misbehaving, and I turned back to her and I said, Savannah, do you want me to treat you like you're in kindergarten? And she said, well, sure. Oh, darn it, I didn't forget it. So anyway, that is what I want to talk about is, I'm going to move to innovation here. And another thing Chris mentioned to us is this Gartner hype cycle. And you've probably been familiar with it. The trigger, the peak of inflated expectations is a place that I kind of want to live. But it goes to the trough of disillusionment, slope of enlightenment, and the plateau of productivity. I may be wrong about this, but my view is that the Juul got caught in this slope of, the peak of inflated expectations. And just like anything, if you mix it together with another program, i.e. money, they just raised $150 million a little more than a year ago, and at that point, hired a CEO from this health, the Chobani just sort of exudes, it feels good, it's healthy, come eat it. And, the whole idea was, of course, we're going to help people get off of smoke, right? It's not the nicotine that kills them, it's the tar, we're going to get them off of cigarettes, this is going to be great, great, great. But when you raise that kind of money and you set a certain kind of expectation, all of a sudden, there are radio advertisements for the Juul. There's these yard signs at gas stations, come in and get it. And now we have a situation where I went to look for one article, and I had to you can page down on Google, article after article is the crisis of children or teens now addicted to this cucumber, mango flavored vape. And so, innovation is awesome, and it can be scary. And so I don't want to be doggy downer on the last day, but I appreciate you helping me think through it. And again, what can start out really great, but now Juul is actually investing themselves $30 million to combat the underage vaping. So free enterprise does matter. I just love that we talk about entrepreneurship and right in the same breath, we're basically saying power into the individual. I feel like we've had a lot of great conversations this week about sort of intellectual property protection versus infrastructure. What is that right balance? My guess is we'll never know, right? How do we know? Lauren said yesterday, the nice thing about government, the government there, we're talking about Vietnam, is that it's incompetent. Did I get that right? Thank you very much. one thing I don't know that we talked about that much is the way in which our government can tend to prop up industries. So I'm actually going to take one that's closest to my heart because it's a place where my view was really challenged and switched. And that is back to the place where I started, and that's Ford. So this is really hard to say because the only reason that my family, my mom, was, I don't even know how to begin to tell you the kinds of things she went through at age 11, 12, 14 in a very poverty-stricken area of Savannah, and married rich to marry into the barber's son. But Ford Motor Company has brought me around the world and brought me to a great education, and yet, so there's a lot of great things, and I learned a lot from it, and I'm going to tell you some areas that I hope we learn from. I'll give you two tiny little bits that I'm excited about is the best, there are a lot of great things that happened when I worked at Forks Books, and it's a great organization, but my favorite was that Alan Mulally walked into my office. And so you probably know of him, or maybe have read about the American icon, but for me to be able to look in the eye a guy like Alan Mulally and say, my dad's had a 20-year retirement because you saved that company, it's really grand. So that was really fun. And it is why I don't argue too much with my 84-year-old mother who last week bought a white Mustang convertible stick shift because that's just what she does, yes. I'm gonna go bouncing up and down the road. And I love Ford so much that when I spend too much time at conferences like this where I eat all that great food and don't find my way to the gym, I get myself on what I call the Henry Ford meal plan. And I know you remember this is the Model A, but you know the Model T, you can have any car you want, any color you want, as long as it's a black Model T. Well, my Henry Ford meal plan is I get to eat whatever I want, whenever I want, however much of it, as long as I want a carrot. Talking about regulation, talking about free enterprise, this was not one of our speakers, but Jared and I had a lovely lunch conversation yesterday, and remarkably, we were both in Munich at 9/11. And that's what we were talking about, which is what brought me back to the U.S. was when something like that experience, I just had to come home. But what we started to talk about is this daughter I've been mentioning. Her name is Savannah. Well, she was born in Munich, and maybe some of you don't realize that my first moments of this child being born was hearing my husband going, "Wir können unsere Tochter nennen, was sie willst." Savannah is not on the approved name list in Germany, and indeed there is. It's so highly regulated there that you must name your child something on the approved name list. And we were lucky as two American citizens to be able to battle that. But I think that's the kind of thing Americans never think about, that level of regulation. And so we were talking about it, and he says, "Oh my gosh, I got a police officer coming to my home, knocking on my door because my television was too loud watching a sporting event." So this is a very highly regulated environment, not one that I'm super excited about. Another thing that John said yesterday, I don't want to go back to it because but we basically he was talking about the unacceptable fatality rates on our highways. And I believe that it's related all to our government that propped up companies like Ford and Firestone that created roads that it has led to urban sprawl, that, don't get me started. I can send you an hour link to a different presentation if you want a whole presentation on this idea. The thing I want to think about when we're talking about free enterprise is what does that mean and what happens when it's not there and how does that impact innovation? And I am actually a believer that so much of the federal funding that channeled us to the almighty automobile decreased innovation that could have happened in trains, in ferries, different kind of roadways, pedestrian access, bicycle, and so on and so forth. And so, and it contributed to what I think Jimmy said this morning. People are more divided by socioeconomic factors than by anything else because we moved them out of certain neighborhoods as opposed to more European neighborhood where everybody's living together. And so to me, the consequences are endless. And that's, again, it's really hard because I'm talking about my bread and butter. And so Ford was giving some of this. And so this is Henry Ford receiving the Grand Cross of the German Eagle from Nazi administration. So this is an Adolf Hitler award. These are gentlemen that were from Detroit that came and actually gave him the award. But I think we forget that, we were doing the same thing in the 30s. And they were creating the Autobahn, and we were creating these roads here. And it was about building up the worker base. And it all sounds good. But sometimes good isn't good if we don't take a long-term view and we aren't really looking at the individual. I should have understood this, but I didn't actually understand. I knew that the Nazi Party was an abbreviation that basically is the socialists for the Arbeiters, the workers. But it wasn't until a friend recently asked me to double-check the German translation that he had on a video, which is ridiculous because my German is so good that I taught, kindergarten one time. But it doesn't get not get to translating Hitler. And the only reason I actually know German, and this is a true story, is that I'm efficient with money, aka cheap. And when I went to business school, you could take another language class, you take a language class for free. So I signed up for German, I rode my bike across the river. When the exam came, the guy hit me on the back, he said, "You do not need to take the exam. No matter how great you do, you have failed the exam." And I came home, I tapped my foot, I said, "Honey, we're moving to Germany." And that indeed is what happened, because the only thing I learned in German class was on page 419, and it said 6 months maternity leave. These are stories you shouldn't tell. And so now with the microphone. But anyway,
That was a lot closer.
thank you. So, and I did learn to speak German well enough to be a volunteer teacher, so that was great. But what I think is interesting is when Hitler said Deutsche Arbeiter, German worker, which when I translate that to German worker, it sounds like it's for everybody, right? But when he was saying it, he was actually saying, those of you in my political party. And so it was a driver, these roads, this innovation was a driver to feed his political party. And so it took me a while until I actually understood the language, to understand how that's happening. And I don't want to get too deep down it, but there's a lot there. So on a lighter note, Neil Sengupta, are you still here? Yes. So very nice. I loved your project. And I'm so happy it wasn't invented earlier, the IoT solution for children pick up and drop off at school, because you might have ruined one of my favorite movies.
Guess what? We're out of time. I'm telling you, doing it wrong. I'm going to do it like this. We're doing it wrong. What is this? This is nuts. Why are they all honking? Because you're doing it wrong. I'm not doing it wrong. I know how to do this.
our driver, and free enterprise does matter.
So that was the final talk of the summit. Bea, you're not leaving though, right? So Bea will be available for deep philosophical dialogue following your talk. I don't know if is there any coffee out there? Yeah, please coffee. There's coffee out there. Feel free to mill about. And thank you very much for joining us this year at the Innovation and Free Enterprise.
How are you? Yeah, I thought I saw you.